Hi there. Thanks so much for joining us today for VTA's BART Silicon Valley Phase 2 Extension Project webinar. My name is Gretchen Biza, and I'm the Community Outreach Supervisor for VTA. And here with me today is Jill Gibson, the Planning and Programming Manager for VTA's BART Phase 2. A lot has happened since our last webinar. Today, we will give a brief overview of the project's history and background, dive into the details of what the project elements are, discuss how project construction is likely to impact you, and identify some upcoming outreach activities that we have planned. You're welcome to write questions using the YouTube comment section throughout the webinar. However, we'll wait until the end of the presentation before addressing and responding to the questions and comments that you posted. And with that, I'll pass it to Jill.
Thanks, Gretchen, and thanks to those of you listening in and participating in this webinar. I'd like to start by providing you with some background on VTA's BART Silicon Valley program. The map on the top right corner of the slide depicts the existing BART system, which currently operates as far as south as Warm Springs and Fremont. VTA's BART Silicon Valley program aims to fill the missing gap in rapid rail transit to ring around the bay. The project is being delivered in 2 phases. Phase 1 is a 10-mile extension with 2 stations, Milpitas and Berryessa, North San Jose. The first phase is nearing the end of construction, and the system testing and safety certification phases are underway and must successfully be completed before Phase 1 can open to passenger service. Phase 2 is a 6-mile extension, which 5 miles will be an underground tunnel. The Phase 2 extension has 4 stations, which includes a maintenance facility in Santa Clara. Passenger service for Phase 2 is expected at the end of 2026. The system will extend the 2 lines that currently serve the Warm Springs station. Service will be provided with 15-minute train frequencies between the hours of 4 a.m. and 1 a.m. Anticipated average weekday ridership for the entire 6-station Silicon Valley extension is 66,000 by 2035. VTA and BART have been working very collaboratively and closely together to get to where we are today. Santa Clara County is not part of the BART district, which is why VTA and BART have a unique relationship critical to delivering this project. So what are VTA and BART's unique responsibilities? VTA will cover all costs associated with the construction and operation of the Silicon Valley extension. VTA is in charge of contracting, procurement for the project, construction, and will retain ownership of the infrastructure. BART is providing technical assistance during the planning, design, and construction of the project. Once constructed, BART will operate and maintain the system, and BART will conduct the service planning. In the past few months, VTA's BART Phase 2 extension project has made a few headlines that you may have seen. There's a lot of attention around how transformative this project will be for Silicon Valley, and in particular, the South Bay. Both the VTA board and BART board approved the single board tunneling construction methodology, the first of its kind in the US, so there's quite a bit of media attention around that major milestone. VTA received a significant funding milestone with the $730 million shot in the arm from California's Senate Bill 1, the newly passed gas tax. This funding helps pave the way to a $1.5 billion request for federal funding. Lastly, a project of this size will not be without its challenges. The San Jose Sharks organization is suing VTA over the state environmental document. Because this is pending litigation, today we will not be able to discuss anything related to the topic, but you can find VTA's statement on the website if interested. We'd like to take a few minutes to highlight some of the benefits this project is expected to bring Silicon Valley. VTA's BART Phase 2 will reduce dependence on automobiles by providing improved transit connectivity to rapid rail transit around the entire Bay Area. The pie chart on your screen shows how we anticipate future BART riders in Santa Clara and San Jose will access the stations. We anticipate that nearly half of the riders will access BART by transferring from other transit services. Approximately 1/3 of the riders will walk or bike to the BART stations, and the remaining 20% of riders are anticipated to use automobile access to BART, whether it be through taxis, Uber, Lyft, Park and Ride, or kiss and ride. This mode of access represents a significant shift in how we plan for and design transit facilities that aligns well with the Bay's plan to shift travel modes away from private automobiles. In addition to connectivity, the project is expected to alleviate congestion by reducing vehicle miles traveled, resulting in lower CO2 emissions. In 2035, the project is expected to have approximately 52,000 riders, reduce annual vehicle miles traveled by 27 million, and reduce CO2 vehicle emissions by over 22,000 metric tons per year, which is equivalent to about 1 year of electricity for 4,300 homes. Additionally, the BART Silicon Valley extension will catalyze economic development by making Santa Clara County a more attractive place to work, live, and play, and help realize the visions that the communities have developed for each station area. The project is already playing a role in stimulating the economy by spurring development, as seen in the recent planned, permitted, and constructed projects in the area. I'd like to go over the Phase 2 extension project schedule. This slide shows our current project schedule, and as you can see, we're near the end of the environmental clearance phase, which is highlighted in red. In April, the VTA Board of Directors approved the project and certified the environmental document. BART's board then accepted VTA's approval of the project. We are anticipating to receive the record of decision from the Federal Transit Administration this June, which will allow us to enter in the engineering phase of the project, where we'll advance design and refine our project costs and schedule. Once the cost and schedule have been revised, we hope to receive the full funding grant agreement from FTA sometime in 2020. Major construction will then begin following the grant. Based on the schedule we have today, we anticipate passenger service for all 4 stations to begin in late 2026. This month, VTA kicked off the process to select a general engineering consultant with the goal of having a team on board in late 2018. This consultant will advance design and refine project cost and schedule to a level needed for us to apply for federal funds. At the same time, we'll be working to develop the delivery strategy and project sequencing. This includes things like how construction contracts will be organized, whether it will be a single contract, and how it will be delivered. After the environmental clearance, the first time you'll see work in the field will be for surveying and utility investigation, which are necessary to inform the design. VTA has kicked off 2 additional planning efforts that are parallel to the project schedule and will also help inform design. Those 2 parallel efforts include the Diridon Integrated Station Concept Plan and the Phase 2 TOD Corridor Strategy and Access Study. Though we won't have time to dive into the details on these 2 studies today, we'd be happy to answer questions that you have at the end, and we plan on holding future webinars specific to these planning efforts. Our current cost estimate for the design and construction of VTA's BART Phase 2 extension is $4.78 billion. VTA has identified a funding strategy for $4.91 billion, which includes the project cost plus $130 million for cushion. As the project advances, we'll be working with FTA through a risk assessment process to determine the appropriate level of contingency required. The project has significant local support, with approximately 70% of the funding coming from local and state resources, which have already been approved. The remaining funding would be granted by FTA through the funding grant we hope to receive in 2020. Now I'd like to cover the primary project elements. This map shows the BART Phase 2 extension. The 6-mile extension includes 5 miles of tunnel. The project will also include 4 stations, starting from the east going west, Alum Rock 28th Street Station, which will serve East San Jose, downtown San Jose Station, Diridon Station, and Santa Clara Station, which will also include a maintenance facility on the western end of the alignment. 2 innovative elements of the project include transit-oriented joint development and the use of single-bore tunnel technology. As mentioned, VTA's BART Silicon Valley Phase 2 extension will include transit-oriented joint development. As you will see in the following slides, VTA will be purchasing land around the stations, which is needed for construction staging. The land we assemble for construction gives us a unique opportunity to partner with private developers to construct high-density, mixed-use development integrated with the stations. This joint development will help shape sustainable growth along the alignment and lead to higher ridership and generate long-term revenue to support operational costs. The development that has been cleared through the environmental document is based on the densities and parking requirements identified in the general plans and specific plans for both the cities of San Jose and the city of Santa Clara. The environmental document has cleared up to 1,675,000 square feet of office space, 160,000 square feet of retail space, and 500 new housing units. To implement the joint development, VTA will work with our city partners through the entitlement process, and through the city coordination, VTA and our private partners will update the scope of the development based on market factors, community input, and local and regional land use goals. We should also note that the development that was cleared in the environmental document for the project does not reflect the future development of the VTA block located north of Santa Clara Street between Market Street and First Street. As I mentioned earlier, in April, VTA's Board of Directors approved the single bore option for construction of the 5 miles of tunnel. The single bore construction method consists of a single 45-foot diameter tunnel, which will be able to accommodate 2 train tracks in a variety of configurations. The single bore tunnel would be constructed approximately 75 feet below ground, resulting in minimal utility impacts. VTA is very excited to move forward with this methodology, which will mark the first time that a single bore has been used for a transit project in the United States. A typical tunnel boring machine consists of a cutter head, which rotates to dig through soil and rock. The excavated material is then removed through a conveyor system within the tunnel boring machine. In addition to cutting the tunnel, the TBM will also construct and reinforce concrete retaining walls to seal and secure the tunnel structure. A typical TBM can excavate about 30 to 75 feet of tunnel per day, of course, depending on the soil conditions. The single bore station configuration would allow for stacked platforms, each accessible from the surface by a single elevator trip. The large diameter tunnel would also allow for the construction of the station platforms within the tunnel itself, reducing construction impacts along Santa Clara Street. The entrance and concourse would be constructed off the public right-of-way with an underground passage providing access to the platforms. Now I'd like to also walk you down the alignment and describe various elements that make up our project, beginning with the East Tunnel Portal. The East Tunnel Portal would connect the Phase 2 extension to the tail tracks of the Berryessa Phase 1 extension. The portal will serve as the east entrance to the tunnel, allowing the BART Phase 2 alignment to pass below the lower Silver Creek. In this area, VTA has identified several construction staging areas, which will be required for staging of construction equipment and materials, as well as to provide space for excavated materials from the tunnel. The first station along the alignment is the Alum Rock 28th Street Station. The station is located between US 101 to the east, 28th Street to the west, St. James Street to the north, and 5 Wounds Lane on the south. This conceptual site plan shown on the screen in the following slides identify the various elements of the stations. The red dash border that you see on your screen around the entire station area represents the construction staging area, which is the property VTA will require for staging construction equipment and materials. The station platform and concourse identified in yellow would be constructed below ground, with street level entrances shown in light purple. The orange area is identified for system facilities such as ventilation, traction power substations, and more. The dark purple represents roadway improvements that will be constructed as a part of the station. Finally, the tan area represents area designated for 1,200 space parking garage, as well as transit-oriented joint development, which could include office, retail, and residential land uses. It should also be noted that the site plan presented here is a conceptual level used to obtain environmental clearance. So we've got to conduct further engineering and design, which will determine the exact location and orientation of the various elements that you see on the site plan. Continuing along the alignment, we come to the 13th Street and Santa Clara Street ventilation structure. Because the BART Phase 2 extension will be mostly operating below ground, the system will need mid-tunnel ventilation structures. The 13th Street ventilation structure is required to exhaust air out of the tunnel in case of an emergency, and will also provide emergency access for first responders. The ventilation structure will be constructed off of the public right-of-way and will include retail development fronting Santa Clara Street. This retail development will provide a visual buffer hiding the vent structure from view. VTA has conducted extensive community engagement about 10 years ago to identify the 13th Street and Santa Clara Street site as the preferred location for this mid-tunnel ventilation structure. The downtown San Jose station will serve as the premier transit station in San Jose's central business district. The station is located along East Santa Clara Street between Market Street and 3rd Street. The station is anticipated to have the highest ridership along the Silicon Valley extension, with an estimated ridership of 24,000 riders by 2035. The station will interface with the 1st and 2nd Street transit malls, as well as the bus service on Santa Clara Street. As previously mentioned, the red dash border identifies the construction staging area. The station platform, shown in yellow, would be located within the single bore tunnel, approximately 65 to 85 feet below Santa Clara Street. The light purple areas represent locations currently identified as station entrances. One would be located on the VTA block between Market Street and 1st Street, where currently the VTA's customer service center stands. Transit-oriented joint development would be constructed on the corner of North 3rd Street and Santa Clara Street, where various system facilities will also be housed. Although it was not identified in the environmental document for this project, as I mentioned earlier, the VTA block, VTA intends to redevelop the VTA block to provide additional office and retail space. Again, we should note that these are conceptual plans used for the environmental document, and as we advance access planning and engineering, we'll be able to refine the location of the station entrances as well as other system facilities. Diridon Station will serve as the primary connection to VTA Light Rail, Caltrain, ACE, and Amtrak, and as well the future high-speed rail. The station will be located between West Santa Clara Street and between Autumn Street and the Caltrain tracks. As shown in the site plan, a reconfigured transit facility will be constructed within the purple area adjacent to the Diridon Caltrain station, where one currently exists today. Transit-oriented joint development is also identified within the station area, which will include a mix of retail and office space. VTA is working with city and agency partners, as I mentioned earlier, on the Diridon Integrated Station Concept Plan to develop a comprehensive vision and plan for the station that would seamlessly integrate current and future transit, as well as surrounding urban development that's anticipated. Continuing along the alignment, turning north, the tracks will turn, and this is again within the tunnel under Stockton Avenue, where the second mid-tunnel ventilation structure is required between Diridon Station and the west end of the tunnel. Currently, VTA has identified and environmentally cleared 4 potential locations along the east side of Stockton Avenue between Shealy Avenue and West Taylor Street. Similar to the 13th Street vent structure, the Stockton Avenue ventilation structure would be hidden from the public's view, with retail fronting Stockton Avenue. In 2019, as VTA advances engineering and design, we will conduct a comprehensive community outreach program to select the preferred location and street level design of the facility, similar to what we did for the 13th Street mid-vent structure. To accommodate the new service provided by VTA's BART Silicon Valley extension, the project will include the construction of the Newhall maintenance facility. This facility will be similar to the maintenance facilities at Concord and Richmond and will be located immediately north of the Caltrain Railroad corridor on the former Union Pacific yard. The roughly 40-acre facility will include storage for up to 200 BART revenue vehicles as well as non-revenue vehicles. Some of the key elements of the Newhall maintenance facility include a train car wash, an inspection pit, maintenance shops for both revenue and non-revenue vehicles, a vehicle turntable, and various train control, power, and communication facilities. The Santa Clara Station will be the end-of-the-line station for VTA's BART Silicon Valley extension. The station would be located at the southern end of Brokaw Road, across from the railroad tracks from the Santa Clara Caltrain station. Unlike the previous 3 stations, the Santa Clara BART station will be constructed at grade, so at the surface level, and will be accessible to the west via a pedestrian tunnel under the Caltrain tracks. In addition to the platform and system facilities, the station will include parking for up to 500 BART parking spaces, as well as 500,000 square feet of office space, retail, and residential development. And again, as we advance our engineering planning and design work, the exact sizing, orientation, and configuration of the station will be refined. The table that you see on your screen is 2035 average weekday ridership with the BART extension. During the environmental process, VTA conducted ridership forecast using a regionally approved land use projections, totaling 52,000 weekday riders. Again, that's for 2035. This ridership forecast is in the environmental document, was developed 2 years ago, and of course is a snapshot in time. As we advance the project, we'll be updating the ridership model to reflect the most recent understanding of future land uses. So now I'm going to walk us through mitigation measures that were included as a part of the environmental document. The environmental document that was approved by the VTA board was an extensive effort that evaluated construction and operational impacts of the project. The list on your screen identifies the overall topical areas that were evaluated through CEQA, and it includes things like air quality, cultural resources, land use, and transportation, among many other topics. The Mitigation and Monitoring Reporting Program summarizes all of the commitments made in the environmental document. VTA will use this reporting program to ensure that mitigation measures are identified, that have been identified, are adhered to and incorporated into the design, construction, and operation of the project. This slide that is representative of mitigation during construction was identified in the document. The noise mitigation during construction would be addressed through temporary noise barriers, as well as monitoring throughout construction to ensure that noise levels are kept below thresholds identified in the document. VTA will also monitor vibration throughout construction, so we'll be conducting pre- and post-construction building surveys to evaluate impacts to adjacent structures. Measures will also be put in place to protect both archaeological and historic resources throughout the project construction. VTA will establish a construction outreach management program. This program will include 3 major elements. First, the construction education outreach plan, which Gretchen is going to talk about more in a moment, the construction transportation management plan, and the emergency services coordination plan. And the important thing to note is that all 3 of these plans will be incorporated into the specifications and contracts through which phase 2 will be implemented and constructed. With that, I'll turn it over to Gretchen to talk about upcoming outreach.
Great. Thanks so much, Jill, and great job. On our side of the house, we have been very busy creating our roadmap for community outreach, and that is the construction, education, and outreach plan. We've broken that plan down into 5 focus areas. The first is general outreach, which is keeping the public informed of project progress, upcoming milestone, and construction activities through traditional materials like flyers, newsletters, and then non-traditional events like this webinar. The second is stakeholder engagement, and that is working with residents, property, and business owners in the vicinity of the station and alignment construction areas. The third focus is business resources, and that includes working with local businesses to support them throughout construction. And then the last 2 areas of our outreach plan are really meant to be collaborative areas with city and organizational partners and really speak to the scope and the scale of the project. We have a placemaking section in our outreach plan. Given the size of the project, we feel that there are opportunities to work with partners to use events and art as a way to minimize construction impacts and keep the public excited about this project. And then the last section we've titled On the Radar. A lot of different projects are happening in Santa Clara County, and many of them intersect with the Phase 2 project, even though they are not led by VTA. This is a section of our outreach plan that helps us make sure that we are keeping track of and coordinating with parallel and adjacent construction efforts in the county. We have also, while we have 5 focus areas, we have broken our construction outreach education plan into 3 phases, and that corresponds with the planning, engineering, and construction timeline. Our planning phase is part A, and that's already started and will go through the end of the year. As my colleagues on the other side of the house work on planning level and preliminary engineering activities, you will see more and more educational content about the project and start to see outreach folks in the field as we gear up. The outreach team will shift focus during pre-construction phase, which is part B, which goes through most of 2019, and that will address pre-construction outreach such as investigative work. And then part C will address upcoming construction activities, and that will last throughout the remainder of the project. Now that we're just around the corner from having a formal record of decision, we're looking forward to getting back out in the field to talk to folks about the project. Starting this summer, the BART Phase 2 project team will have a designated liaison at the Downtown Customer Service Center Tuesdays and Thursdays between the hour of 10 a.m. and 2 p.m., and that is at 55 West Santa Clara Street. We are also kicking off a series of informal lunches to talk about the project. Our hope is that you can come out, meet the project team, and ask us questions. Bring your lunch and join us on June 27th at St. James Park between 12 and 1 p.m. We are currently updating our schedule of outreach events for this project, and the best way for people to make sure that they have the information that they need is to sign up for updates at www.vta.org/phase2info. And so with that, we are done with our presentation and we're ready for questions. Thanks so much for sticking with us. We realize that there is a lot of information to cover. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, please feel free to ask questions by typing them into the box on the right of your screen. Additionally, our plan is to give future webinars on more specific topics. So if you have a suggestion, feel free to type that in as well. Thank you so much. And now I'm going to go ahead and take a look at the questions. And the very first question that I have is, when will Phase 1 open? So I'm going to go ahead and hand this question over to Jill. Jill, do you want to go ahead and take it?
Yeah, thanks, Gretchen. Currently, we do not have a forecasted date at this time. VTA and BART are in the system testing phase where literally tens of thousands of tests are being performed on every inch of the 10-mile extension. Only once the system is safely certified and fully integrated will passenger service begin.
Excellent. Our phase two webinar. We'll start with the Phase 1 question. It's valid. And then our next question is actually on Phase 2, and that is, when will construction on Phase 2 begin?
Yeah, so once we receive environmental clearance, which we're expecting the record of decision shortly in June, we'll then be able to start with some field investigation work, which will help advance the design of the project. As I mentioned in the presentation, we're in the process of bringing on a general engineering consultant who will assist with the design as well as helping us identify a project delivery method. At this time, we don't have a super detailed timeline of the construction, and our best estimate would be that some utility relocation would likely occur at the end of 2019 or the second half of 2019, with then the major construction contracts tentatively getting underway sometime in 2020. If you're interested in keeping up to date with the project's progress, we'd encourage you to sign up for updates using this link on the slide. And I know our outreach team is going to be updating information on the website.
Indeed. Thank you, Jill. We have a question here, a series of 2 questions, actually. The first is, can VTA rely more on in-house expertise instead of hiring outside contractors? And I'll let you go ahead and answer that.
So VTA hires consultants or contractors for areas that we don't have the in-house expertise. So we hire when we don't have that in-house expertise.
Right. Okay. Thank you. And another question here. Why is the single bore done with one track on top of the other instead of side by side?
So single bore has side-by-side tracks running in the running tunnel between stations, and it's stacked at the platforms at the stations.
Okay. Excellent. Okay, and another question here. What is the current status of the land acquisition for stations, vent structures, and construction staging?
Yeah, good question. So acquiring property cannot occur until we receive environmental clearance. We also have to advance engineering on the project to better define the real estate needs. The federal government and the state of California have very specific processes for property acquisition required for capital projects such as this. The timing of property acquisition is also dependent upon our delivery method and the construction sequence for the project. The VTA team will be reaching out to impacted property owners as soon as we develop a more detailed schedule for project delivery. And again, if you'd like to have a more detailed discussion on this subject, please send us an email. And VTA-BART@VTA.org is our email address.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Thank you. So another question here, and this is related, is the Vung Tao restaurant in danger of eviction, and what will happen to it if it's evicted? And I might be able to take a stab at that, Jill, if I may,
Sure.
Because we are still working on preliminary engineering. We really have not reached out to evict anyone. VTA has not done any outreach to any property owners at this time. So anything that has happened is separate from this project. Okay, and we have a question that relates to the Santa Clara Station. So curious to hear why for Santa Clara, an underpass rather than an overpass was chosen for the pedestrian connection.
Sure. The pedestrian overpass was very costly. And so we wanted to have a pleasant, walkable environment. And so the current underpass that was recently completed will provide that.
Excellent. Okay, and let's see here. So a question here, the 1.6 million square feet of commercial development is a projection for both the entire BART Phase 2 project or both 1 and 2?
It's for Phase 2.
It's for Phase 2?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. And, sorry, get on up here. Okay, so a question over here. How much will it cost to ride BART?
It's a great question. So BART sets the fare policy. They have a methodology of what the fare would be. It's a distance-based fare, and the fares are not finalized, but I can give you an example of a proposed fare from the new Berryessa North San Jose station to the Embarcadero station.
Mm-hmm.
It would be $775, which is 45 miles. So $77.75 for 45 miles.
All right. Excellent. And a follow-up question, after you pay, how long will it take me to get from San Francisco from San Jose?
So it'd be approximately about an hour.
Yeah. Good deal. Good deal. And, I have a question here on the tunnel boring machine. What kind of noise and vibration can I expect from the tunnel boring machine?
Sure. So noise and vibration from the BART project has been thoroughly studied in accordance with the FTA guidelines as a part of the environmental process that I described earlier. Where significant noise or vibration impacts have been identified, mitigation has been evaluated and proposed to reduce those impacts to less than a significant level. The FTA threshold for ground-borne noise from trains running in the tunnel, it doesn't ensure inaudibility, but the level is very low compared to other typical indoor sounds. This is a super technical topic, and we've got a lot of information that's location specific in the environmental document. And of course, folks that are participating or listening in, feel free to send us an email with more specific questions, and we'd be happy to respond.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, great. And I have another question here, and that is, why does it take so long for testing once all of the construction is done?
It's system testing is a very complicated and technical process, and it requires train control communication from kind of BART headquarters. So it's very complicated, and so it takes a long time.
Yeah.
And the goal is obviously to ensure safe passenger service, so it's worth the time.
Right, and integrating the two systems too, right. I would imagine.
Yeah.
Excellent. And I've got another question here, and that is there a plan to extend BART along the peninsula?
So no, BART Phase 2 connects to Caltrain and other rail services at Diridon and Santa Clara Station, where then you could transfer to Caltrain, ACE, or Capital Corridor. And Caltrain, of course, runs up the peninsula and provides rail service.
Excellent. So we are ringing the bay.
We are ringing the bay, we are, indeed.
Excellent. Okay, and get over here and see if I have any more questions coming in. Sure. So I have a question, and this relates to the TOJD, and that is, why only 500 new housing units with Phase 2? 500 is absurdly low given the housing shortage that exists here.
Yeah, sure. So the land uses and the densities that were cleared in the environmental document are consistent with the city's general plans and specific land use plans, so station area plans, et cetera. As we move forward and work with potential private partners, and as market conditions allow, we expect to be updating what that proposed development is in the future. Excellent. So it was cleared from the environmental document, and we expect changes in the future.
Excellent. Great. Okay, and a question here, thank you guys for all of your great questions. We're happy to be able to answer them for you. I have a question. If you are going to SF from Diridon, will rail, Caltrain or future high-speed rail always be the preferred option? I think that's... I think the question is, and basically the answer is, you have choices, is what the BART service provides. And so depending upon where you are in San Francisco, at what time of day, and the frequency of the train that you're looking to catch, this provides another option. Perfect.
Yep.
Great. Another question here, Jill. How is BART's plan for downtown San Jose impacted by the city's urban village plan?
Yeah, so we're working very closely with the city of San Jose, and the question was about how the
how will BART's plan for downtown San Jose be impacted by the city's urban village plan?
So we're working, as I mentioned, very closely with the city to coordinate our planning efforts. We are conducting a TOD strategy effort, and the city has got a variety of specific plans as well as kind of some mobility plans. And the goal is to have the plans enhance and support each other and build off of each other's work.
Okay.
So collectively, we are trying to realize the same vision that the city is, to have a good mixed use and transit friendly, rich environment.
Excellent. And I would just take this opportunity to say that while BART will be operating the system in Santa Clara County, VTA will own the system. So it's not necessarily just BART's plan. It's VTA's work to really bring folks, visitors, and workers into Santa Clara County. Okay, and I have a question here. Which side? So this is actually a question about the tunnel boring machine. Which side is the TBM coming from?
So that's a great question. The environmental document clears the tunnel boring machine to go in either portal, which leaves maximum flexibility for the contractor on construction sequencing. So short answer is we're not sure yet. We don't know which side. Is it east or west? We don't know.
Okay.
But more to come.
Yes. Excellent. And another question about tunnel boring machines, and that is how many of them? How many do we get? Can we race them?
The environmental document doesn't limit the number of TBMs that can be used. And again, that's to leave maximum flexibility for the contractor. So our technical team is considering the costs and benefit of increased costs for two TBMs versus the schedule savings. So the decision of the number of TBMs will be left up to the contractor to determine in consultation with VTA. Excellent.
Thank you. So I have a construction question, and I would like to add my own question to it as well. This is a question. How much will this interfere with traffic on the Alameda during construction? And I guess my addition is more, what year would we anticipate? I know that we don't know quite yet. It's still a ways away, but.
Yeah, so major construction we're anticipating sometime in 2020. And as I mentioned as we get updated information, we'll be both posting that online.
Okay.
And then the specific details of truck traffic, haul routes, et cetera, we'll be working with our city partners to develop, and it will be well in advance public notice of that traffic.
Absolutely. And that ties back to the outreach and education plan that we have been working on my side of the shop. And that is that, as the closer we get to construction, the more clear those details become. But we do encourage folks to sign up for updates, upcoming events. Right now, this will be a news source for you. Later, we will turn this into an alerts source, and that is www.vta.org/phase 2 info. Okay, we have some more questions here. The question is, would budget cuts affect FTA funding, and do you have a backup plan?
Good question. So we understand that there's uncertainty with federal funding, and one of the things FTA looks at is matching dollars. And so we're very unique in that we're well positioned. We've got 70% of our funding is local and state funding. And we're also talking with FTA about alternative funding options. So overall, we're confident in our ability to obtain federal funding.
Good. All right. And there are more questions here. Just let me get to it. Oh, okay. So a question here about one of the vent structures. How relevant was the site selection? Is the site selection for the 13th Street vent structure, given that it was done a decade ago?
So can you repeat that question?
Sure thing. How relevant was the site selection for the 13th Street vent structure, given that it was done a decade ago?
The site selection is still relevant. It has to be done halfway in between the station, so that hasn't changed.
Okay.
So it's still relevant.
Excellent. And I think that when you brought up the event structure previously, you mentioned that it would be wrapped with retail.
Yes. Yeah.
And that would also, there's the location, and that would also mask and house some of the operational.
It would
facets.
provide the wrapped development would provide some visual screening from the street.
Right, and hopefully some services too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Excellent. And let's see here. I have a question from Charles Hunger, and that is, it wasn't clear to me earlier. Are all the funds for the San Jose section fully funded, or will residents of Santa Clara County be asked to approve new taxes to pay for it?
So good question. We've got, should we go to the slide?
Sure.
Let's go to the funding slide, slide 12.
There we go.
There we go. So we have secured all of the local and state funds, which includes Measure A and Measure B. And so the funding that we're looking for, we're asking the Federal Transit Administration for the remaining funds. So the answer is the local sales tax is already supporting the project. Excellent.
Excellent, excellent. And I have another question here around funding strategy for TOJD. And that is, what is funding strategy for TOJD work?
Yeah, so I mentioned earlier that we were looking at some alternative funding strategies, and it includes expedited project delivery. It's a pilot program within the Capital Investment Grant Program that the key component is private-public partnership, which it includes transit-oriented joint development. So VTA is exploring that. And as we have more information, we will be sharing that. So good question.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we may have gotten all of our actual questions. We appreciate some of the comments, but it looks like we've got our questions answered here. I would like to thank folks for coming out and joining us today for this, there's a last minute question here. And I understand this question because it's an exciting thing. And that is, what does the downtown San Jose station look like on the surface? Is it a huge station below ground?
Yeah, so we don't know what it looks like yet. What you saw on the screen were conceptual site plans used for the environmental document. And we've got a lot of engineering and planning work to be done to move the design forward. So just to remind folks, the actual vertical circulation elements of the station are off this public street. So they're off Santa Clara Street. And we are working to integrate transit-oriented joint development with the station entrances. So we're very excited about that. And we've got a lot of work ahead of us, and we'll be keeping the public updated as we move forward.
Excellent. Great. And a question here, is it possible for the stations to have an island platform with side-by-side tracks instead of on top of each other?
So that would make the tunnel. So as I mentioned earlier, the single bore tunnel is a 45-foot diameter tunnel. So changes to the configuration within the tunnel, such as adding an island, would require a larger tunnel diameter, which we've identified the 45-foot diameter tunnel we're sticking with.
Right, right. Great. Okay. Jill, I want to thank you so much for all of your knowledge and answering all of these questions. Viewers, I want to thank you so much for joining us today. Just a reminder to please sign up for updates and information at vta.org/phase2info. And after the viewing is complete, if you could please fill out the survey, we intend to bring more events and opportunities for information to you in this format. And so any feedback that you have is greatly appreciated. Lastly, if this information was helpful to you, please share with your neighbors, with your neighborhood association, anyone that you might think would like to have more information about this exciting project. Thank you so much.